everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So I'm Ayati Dashkar. I'm an 8th grade student. I'm the Global Youth Lead for the World Women Foundation. That's why I'm here. I'm the Global Youth Ambassador for the Heidesium Foundation, which is a UNESCO-recognized foundation in Switzerland. And I'm also the host of the podcast Girls Talk STEM. And I was born in 2012, that year where the world was obsessed with an ancient calendar prediction, the end of the world. We laughed it off then, but as I stand here in 2026, and that old fear feels a bit more real. For my generation, complex global challenges are not headlines. They are the atmosphere of our lives. We have grown up in the shadow of a pandemic, witnessed the birth of generative AI, watched the climate clock tick down. I am here because the spirit of dialogue is the only tool powerful enough to bring our shared anxiety and turn it into shared agency. But for dialogue to work, everyone must be at the table. And right now they aren't. We see a retention crisis where 40% of women leave tech within 7 years. We don't have a pipeline problem. We have a leaky foundation problem. And if the foundation is leaking, metaphorically, the ladder is inevitably going to break. And despite decades of investment, progress for women in senior leadership is stalling. We're seeing a representation slip back to levels from 5 years ago. The challenge isn't a lack of ambition or capability. It is a systemic failure to sustain the very talent we claim to value. And today we're joined by leaders who understand exactly how to fix that foundation. So I want to give it up for Ms. GINKA, Professor TOEGEL. I'm so sorry, I didn't want to butcher that. Ms. GINKA TOEGEL, who is the professor of leadership at IMD. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Let me start with a quick reality check. If leadership advancement for women were powered by good intentions, right now, we all would be sitting here in a room full of women chief executive officers. But of course, this is not the case. And it was already mentioned, it's not a pipeline problem, it's not a readiness problem, it's a problem of the leadership machinery. And that's what we will be talking about. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by these 3 wonderful women who sit at the control panel of talent, technology, global operations. Now, let me introduce the panel. So right next to me is Karen Kimbrough. She is chief economist at LinkedIn, and she serves also on the board of directors at Fannie Mae. She has previously worked at Google and also Bank of America. Next to Karen is NEETI MEHTA SHUKLA. She is co-founder and also chief impact officer at Automation Anywhere. This is one of the world's leading intelligent automation companies. She is also a leading voice on artificial intelligence, on digital inclusion, and also the future of work. And we have also Carolina Garnett, who is the Chief Human Resources Manager at ABB. She has over 2 decades of experience in the fields of human resources management, talent and performance management, people development. She has also held various senior roles in multinational and also consulting firms. So you can see a lot of experience here on this side, a lot. Let's get started. And Karen, I'm sure you're going to agree with me that it's good to start with some data. And just today, IMD and LinkedIn published a white paper. And according to this white paper, women's representation at senior levels is going backwards. What is interesting, it's not just in a domain which are dominated by men. It's exactly the same also in industries which are dominated by women. So Karen, the question is, what is the biggest misconception that leaders have about this backsliding, and what is it that they're misdiagnosing?
Yeah. So thanks so much for having me, and hello and good afternoon, everyone. So what we're seeing at LinkedIn, I think, is really interesting. It's exactly as Ayati, who introduced the session, said. We are seeing that the number of women in leadership positions kind of peaked around 2022. One of the things we're measuring, actually, though, is that pipeline, to use that word, of new entrants to top-level managerial roles. And what's happening is that is slowing. So there are women who are at those top levels, but the new inflow of new faces is slowing since 2022. Okay, so what's the biggest misconception? I think it's that somehow it's something that women are doing that's holding them back. And then I think when we look at the data, we do find, I will say this, we do find that women show up differently on the platform in terms of what skills they want to showcase relative to an equivalently skilled man with the same job and education. And we do find that women are more reluctant to apply for roles when they don't meet all of the qualifications. But when we control for all that, the biggest misconception is that somehow women are maybe applying less or that they are doing something wrong. And what we find is that women just generally fare worse when the labor market gets what we call in economics more slack, meaning there are more applicants for every role out there. And it seems like what happens in institutions and leadership is they tend to kind of gravitate towards men. The only exception is when women get hired into something that's considered like a risky position or a super stretch or something that maybe isn't going to succeed, and we'll see how she does. And then they do accede to those senior level roles, but those are like not, supported and guaranteed. So the biggest misconception is somehow that women are signaling incorrectly or doing something wrong, and really has a lot to do with the labor market and the macro, and also how leadership approaches its hiring decisions.
Yeah, Karen, this reminds me of Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize winner who published a lot of work on making decisions under conditions of uncertainty. And in one of his papers, he says, when uncertainty increases, we tend to fall back on what feels familiar.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that explains a lot of why we see women faring better in what we'll call a tight labor market. And by that, I mean, think what it was like in 2021 and 2022, when if you really wanted to move around, you could. There were lots of opportunities. Women tend to fare better. Yeah. And right now, it's not the case.
It's not the case, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
NEETI, we're going to continue with the white paper. Another finding in this white paper, which is kind of puzzling, is the following one. 69% of companies think that they're doing enough. But only 9% of those same companies that think they're doing enough have reached a gender balance at the top. Only 9%. So why do you think this kind of belief is so persistent, and in what way is this risky?
I think part of it is, like we mentioned, when you go back to the familiar in times of uncertainty, I think COVID and the pandemic definitely did kind of do a little bit of a reset for many people. So if you look at the last 10 years, there was a lot of compliance work done to bring women to top leadership or boards or et cetera. There was a significant movement around that. And so they felt they ticked the boxes. Companies felt, I've got 2 women leaders, I've got 1 person on the board, I've done this, I've done that. So they feel a sense of, okay, I went on this journey and I've reached it. But they didn't realize it was the start of the journey, number one. And then came the times of uncertainty, which again pulled it back. But one thing I'd like to say there is that I always look at this situation from 2 sides. I think there's the side of what the companies are doing or not doing currently. And then, given the situation we are in, what are women doing or not doing currently? And so we have to look at both those sides, because for good or for bad, that's what happened. We went through the pandemic, there's times of uncertainty, economic crisis, there's more wars than ever. Empathy is kind of walking out the door most days, and you need to bring that all back in. So I think companies need to do it, and so do women. And I think we need to kind of take a step back and reset, look at it, and see what we can do today, in today's climate, to make this change.
Yes, so true. Carolina, talking about what we can do today, at senior levels, advancement becomes less about performance and much more about who feels to be a safe bet. To be a safe bet. What creates that sense of security, and where could that sense of security unintentionally maybe exclude capable women?
First, thanks for having me. And actually, what we have seen in ABB, which I'm representing here, over the last 5 years, we've seen the opposite to what you describe. And that made me reflect when I read the article, and also what brings that safety for all candidates, no matter what you represent. And I think what's typically, my observation, having been in various companies, what's underestimated is the rigor you have to bring when you work on making a workplace more inclusive, have higher representation. Because you have to accept first that it's a 5 to 10 year journey. And I've seen too many companies address, if you want to increase the gender balance, to treat it as a standalone topic, that we have to fix this problem. But what is required, and I thought it was very fascinating in your studies, that one of the barriers that now where we see this is that we didn't understand that it requires a change of the organizational culture in parallel of your ambition to reach high representation. So I think why we now have seen success in ABB over the last 5 years, we are not yet where we want to be, but we're progressing very well, is that we have intentionally worked both systemic with the culture and with the leadership. So that means if I would leave tomorrow, it's not a person-dependent topic, someone that is passionate about it. And when she or he leaves, it's gone. It's inbuilt in our ways of working. So that means, when I say systemic, we have built it into the long-term planning process for all the businesses. When we are planning the coming 5 years with all the strategies, all the other investment, this is one of the topics they also plan around. That also you have to look at your policies, what you can do to really make it fully embedded systemically in the company. Building on the values, what your expectations on leaders. As I said, leaders has a very important, because we are the ones recruiting. So if we are not grounded in the values, why we do things, what company we want to have, it's not just about the how, it's also, and just not the what, it's also the how. They are also more brave, I say brave, when they select the candidate. We have, like the mantra, we should always select the best candidate. But that means you have to build the pipeline, and that takes time. Yeah. So patience. And I think that's why I think we see some of your results, that when things are getting a bit more uncertain, it shows that the rigor were not really there in companies. Yeah. You maybe did a lot of good single efforts, but you didn't build the rigor in a systematic way, how we really, truly transform companies, the values, what we believe, the type of leaders we want to have.
Yeah, thank you very much for raising also this governance issue, so that it becomes part of the culture of the organization. So a couple of years ago, we thought the ladder is broken at the bottom. But now we know it's broken not just at the bottom, but also at the doorway to power. So let's talk now what we need to redesign. So, NEETI, what would change if sponsorship would become evaluated leadership obligation, which is also rewarded? In other words, we keep track, we measure it, because we know what gets measured gets done, what gets rewarded gets repeated. So what do you think is going to shift first? And also, where could we expect some resistance?
So I've thought long and hard about this, both for Automation Anywhere, but just in general, because any woman in power you meet, you're like, okay, how can I move the needle? What can I do, right? I think one of the things that, at least from my experience, and this is a little bit more personal, is like I mentioned before, I look at it from the organizational side, and then I look at it from the woman's side. And I think one of the things that we can do now is, as women, understand that you're going to hit the leadership position or choice or be the choice when you can sell it in a way, right? Like, what can I do? How can I do it well? And why am I the right leader for it? And to me, that's the aha moment. The aha moment has to come from within you. Just like in marketing, when we talk about a customer, we're like, what's the aha moment where the customer says, yeah, you're the one I want, you're the product I want, or you're the service I want. And I think a lot of women, and this also alludes to what you said, we never apply for the job that we, know it backwards, forwards, come Monday, come Sunday. And if you know that aha moment, one, I think women should portray it well, communicate it well, and then coming back to sponsorship, have the sponsor not just sponsor you, but sponsor your aha. And why that's important is I think then you are chosen for that position because you're really good at it. And that becomes systemic, to your point, versus, hey, I just want to help this one particular lady or person I know, or colleague or whatever it may be, right? And then from the organization side, coming back, is the same thing, have the organization and the leaders be trained to spot the ahas. We have an inclusion agenda, and we want to kind of get more leaders into it. But we want these leaders to have these aha that we want to bring into leadership with an inclusive lens. And the reason, again, that's important from an organizational point is because you get the right leaders for the right job. They're risk takers. They can then deliver your vision or whatever it is that you have brought them on board for. So to me, now it's not just about having a leader, or out of my C-suite, I have 2 women or 4, whatever it may be, from this minority or that particular agenda that I might have. It's about getting the right ahas with that inclusion, because then they will stick, they will stay, they will actually thrive, and they will showcase that this is something that will benefit the business as a whole. So I think coming at it from both those angles, from a sponsorship lens, is super important. And I think if we continue to do what we did pre-pandemic, which was have a little bit of a goal set only, it may not work in the long term. So that's kind of how I think about it, and I think it can help both. It can help the systemic aspect of it, and I think it will also help the fact that women sometimes don't take the risk of doing something more than they've ever done before.
Mm-hmm. Right. Karen, if the problem is the system design, not women's readiness, what is the first structural lever that you would try to redesign? And is there anything that you're going to make mandatory instead of optional?
Since I made the case that I think it's not something that women are doing wrong, I think it's the way we are making hiring decisions that is the barrier or the challenge. I think we need to rethink that a little bit. How do we make hiring decisions? How do we make decisions that are robust across different economic cycles? I think both of the points you made, instilling a really deep, long-term commitment that's structural and not just a key woman point, and also thinking about getting that aha, those both make sense to me. But what I would say is this, and if we haven't done it, I feel compelled to mention the word AI because we have to say it. So let me share one thing with you all. So one of the things we see is like this incredible demand for talent. Let me just take a case example. Right now, there's an incredible demand for talent that has either AI literacy, the idea that I know how to use AI tools that are relevant for whatever my domain is, or I have some kind of deep AI technical expertise. I'm an AI engineer or whatever it may be. And we already see gaps there in how women show up or are represented, whether it's quantum skills, which are also in hot demand, AI skills. And we know, and Ayati, is that, and we know what you said is very correct. We see women at 50% when they graduate out of STEM. They come into the workforce at 50%, and then every decade it just chips away until you get to the top level, and it's 25%. So what do I think the issue is? It's partly creating an environment where women feel like they're thriving, and I don't think the environment is one that has to be hostile to men or problematic for them, but it has to be way more open to letting women thrive. And what we see in our data is that women slide out of that pipeline to leadership right when they're ready to have a family, right in that middle tier, exactly when they need to be proving themselves and running twice as fast. And so our findings have been that for women to succeed to the C-suite, they need to sprint in the first 10 years. Because then they need to take a breath and do other things, right? Maybe have a family, get married, whatever. Men don't necessarily have to sprint. They can kind of just run continuously and get there, but women need to sprint. And if they don't make it to a certain level within the first 10 years, they're very unlikely to get further, whereas men can kind of progress, and if they don't get as far in that first 10 years, they still have a shot at gaining ground, if that makes sense. So that's what we're finding when we look at people and how they get to senior positions. They're not going and they're not running the same race. So I think we need to kind of even out the race. Now, that was a very allegoric kind of answer. You're all like, okay, so what should we actually do? I mean, it's hard for me to say. I'm an economist, so I'm looking at the data, I'm telling you what I see, but I do think there's something there about the fact that we're all running different races to try to get to the C-suite.
But that's a very interesting point. I have never come
Thank
across
you.
by
Yes,
the way.
it shows up in the data.
That's a really interesting point, that we have different speed and different races.
We have to, if you want to try to have it all.
Yeah. Right. Carolina, if the declining female representation is a kind of an early sign that something is not okay, what risk do you think boards are still underestimating? Because at the end of the day, the buck stops with them.
No, it's a very good question. I mean, I'm a strong believer, and also research shows that the more diverse perspective, the better risk assessments, decision making, and innovation. And I mean, our company is built on innovation. That's how the company was founded, and then that's also for our future. So, of course, you're entering into risk not to be having the highest performance you could get out of that company, the highest innovation level. So I think that's, to me, it's a critical question for the boards. And boards are asking these questions, they're interested to see how are you progressing. But I think perhaps what boards could spend more time on is, of course, numbers are one thing, and there you can see it's progressing or it's declining. But even if it's progressing, you have to go a bit deeper to see then what's the rigor behind it. Because, again, you can fix the problem fairly quickly on senior levels. You can bring from outside, which can be a good thing. But it doesn't expose maybe the lack in the pipeline. And I would, if I was a board member, I would look also to the profit and loss positions. Those are the ones that will lead the companies in the future. What's the quality of the pipeline? What are the stepping stones? How are the distribution there? How can we work to prepare these future leaders for becoming future CEOs? I would spend a bit more time there as a board to look at the quality of those P&L pipelines, go a bit deeper, but also then look at coming back to this environment and the culture where we want everyone to come as they are in ABB. I know it's like tagline, but I think it's important because no matter if you groom leaders within or if you bring from outside, that promise also makes people stay. If you don't have a culture that where you can thrive and grow, it won't be sustainable numbers. You might look good for a while, but then people will leave. So that coming back again to the importance of building a culture where everyone can perform and be successful. Yeah. So that's, again, you have to work on that in parallel. And I think you have to measure that as well, and that's typically company can do in the engagement service and see how those scores are also increasing or declining, coming into, how do we have an inclusive culture? There's so many elements that you measure that could also be good things for a board to look out for. Is this company progressing really? So, but it's a risk of innovation. That's my firm belief, and it's that's tough one for us as a technology company.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned something so important: metrics, and quite often we look at activity metrics. So, how many programs have we organized? How many people have gone through the programs, initiatives, etc. And we very seldom look at the power metrics. How many women do we have, as you said, in P&L positions? How many of them are leading major turnarounds, transformations, merger and acquisition integrations? Important projects, right? So it's time now for questions from the audience. Yes, please. Yes, please, go ahead. Do you have a microphone? It will be great if you would introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you very much for the microphone as well. My name is Jenny Bostrom. I work in the pharma industry and I'm also active with UNICEF. It was an amazing discussion. Thank you. I'm taking so much back with me. My questions was around the more systemic and structural context, because companies are not operating in isolation, women are not living in isolation. So what is the impact of the culture and policies in society in order to unlock the full potential of women?
I mean, I'll start, but you all have to pick up right with me, right? It definitely feels like there's an ebb and flow to this, whether it's a tagline or it's sincere, this idea of like, we want to make sure we're addressing disparities in representation. And there's times when a lot more effort is put into it and times when there's less. And it definitely feels like right now is less of a focus. I mean, I'm just going to say how this is my personal observation. And so I think that somebody recently said, in some ways firms have an opportunity to take a stand when politicians can't. And maybe there's opportunities for firms to kind of take that stand even when the winds are changing. Because I think we're still on sort of like shaky ground if we're just waiting for someone else to advocate. Like, this is your moment to walk through the window. Careful, it's going to close soon. Like, that's not great. We're all going to stand in front of the window waiting for it to open again so we can jump through. So we need to make sure the window is always open. And again, to torture some analogy that I've started, I think that the way to do it is to have more than one person holding that window open. If we just only hope it's government or policy leaders or only hope it's firms, we're still vulnerable. It's not sustainable. We need many, many people to be around holding that window open.
I might go next. I'm going to come at it from a very, very different angle. I think it's actually a fantastic opportunity right now and where society is right now. The AI revolution is kind of changing how we do work. Bottom line, doesn't matter which industry you're in, it's going to change over the next few years. And there's so much work being done around reskilling, workforce development, bringing more people in, etc. I think take the bull by the horns. This is the moment the women have to kind of really take it by the horn, because we can leapfrog. We can get there faster than we thought we would, because by and large, the men are in the same boat. They're also going through the transition. And so it's an opportunity. And I think it's a hard one in the sense of we're barely trying to kind of keep up with everything that's going on in our jobs, and now we're asking people to work, change and reskill and embrace AI in various ways. But in my opinion, I don't think we have a choice. If we want to reach that level of parity, this is an exact moment. This is an opportunity. We need to do it. We need to bring more women to get reskilled and take that leap.
Can I just say I love her point? That's such a great point. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. Yeah.
That was it. I just wanted to applaud. I was like, yes.
No, I was thinking that, one thing that you mentioned earlier with the sprint, and one thing that is, of course, being a global company, knowing that the support structure around looks very different in the society depending on where we operate. And of course, companies, we can only do so much. Of course, we offer daycare at our sites in countries where it's not, offered. But here I'm also hoping that the demographics in many countries now with an aging workforce, countries that perhaps have not been so active in implementing those support structures for children care, daycare, that these countries will be dependent now on having women now active in the labor market. That I also hope will kind of put again the focus on more countries, because again we can only do as much as companies to support this, but there needs to be a joint also effort together with the society and the countries where we operate. But it's a slow moving, of course, but Switzerland is a good example where aging workforce and not having that representation of women at the workplace to the same extent in other countries. And now it starts to change it because we need the workforce. So I think there are some dynamics that perhaps can speed up some of that decision making that perhaps looked a bit impossible just a few years back.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, go ahead.
I'm gonna check from my notes. So the first question you raised was when performance is no longer seen as the primary security to achieve a high performance chief roles in the company. Carolina mentioned that you need to build up the culture within the company to support this ecosystem. But my question is, because in the morning sessions, it was mentioned more with the AI and everything, you need to be more resilient. So this X functions, X ecosystem experiences are very important. So my question is, what objective signals remain for women and external candidates to demonstrate readiness and leadership credibility for these chief roles, coming maybe from the different industry or from the different level of experience, and then how they can demonstrate this to sell the aha moment?
That's a very good point. I'll take a stab at it. I wish I had a clear solution for it, but no, I think it comes back to the sponsorship question that came from the survey that IMD did. In times like this, when there is so much of organizational change. So if you, again, coming back to the organization size, every business is undergoing tremendous change. They're looking at competition in a different light, there's technology stack at a different light, the challenges they're facing at a different light, etc. I would come back to it to say, bring that sponsorship with you in a way, if you can, and again, find that sweet spot. Because if we just sell the fact that I did my job really well. Look, my manager loved me. I have references. I've done this for 10 years, whatever it may be. That may just not be enough at this point, and unfortunately so. I think men have it easier. I think bring that sponsorship with you. Have somebody who's a reference that says, this is the person you want to lead this change. This is the person you want who will kind of take the right risk or balance it out or whatever your X factor, your aha moment might be. And I think that's important because it's just hard in times of change to move companies or to move industries and bring that with you. I agree with you. I think it's hard.
May I add a point? While you were talking, I was thinking of something, and I really don't want to sound salesy. I didn't come here to sell LinkedIn on any of you, but one of the things that I want to preface that, all right? One of the things that we found when we were doing our labor market report for this event at Davos was that people who got, and this is people, it doesn't matter if you're what your gender or where you are, people who were more successful in getting hired into a new organization. Wait, how do I say this in plain English? Okay, you had 3.2 times better chance of being hired into a new organization if you knew somebody there. Okay, in plain English, what does that mean? Networking is more important now than it was even like 4 or 5 years ago. And that's such a corny thing to say, but it really is true. We're seeing it in the data. Like, so knowing somebody who can be your sponsor or your advocate into an organization saying, hey, I know this woman, she's fantastic. And yes, she hasn't had that role before, but I guarantee, who will vouch for you, right? And so I guess I'm just plugging what you're saying again, but wanted to say like the data kind of bear out this idea of like if you can find somebody in an organization to like advocate for you, network really matters.
I'll add at least a personal experience. So I moved roles. I led marketing and brand at Automation Anywhere for a very many number of years. And just past the pandemic, I moved roles into Chief Impact Officer. I know nothing about social impact. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur in the tech field and come from marketing, and I know nothing about impact. I had to sell myself internally. The company's large enough that it's not enough just to be a founder to do what you want, of course. And the reason I say that is the way I sold myself was I have done version 1.0 100 times over for any number of challenges. And I can do it for this one too. So what I sold was the fact that I could lay the groundwork, I could create the version 1.0, and I could do it at a better spot than X person you hire from outside. And I think that worked. And I mean, I think the Impact Office is doing fantastically. The leadership is happy with it. The board is happy with it. And we're doing great impact as well. So the point is I've not done impact. I have no expertise. I hired people with expertise in it, of course. But selling that aspect, that the fact that I can figure it out and I can do it better as version 1.0 because I have that experience, I think changed it. And that sponsorship was what was important for me to land it.
Maybe just one additional comment. It was a very good question. I was thinking what you said earlier, that you have seen some data that women are not as good in, or we describe skills differently, you said in the beginning.
They select, I'll just say it really clearly.
Exactly.
It's not that they're not as good, they just choose to highlight different skills than what men choose. It's neither better nor worse.
And maybe
but
the answer is also partly there. Because, I mean, joining ABB, for example, coming from external, you would have the same kind of barrier being a man or a woman, because many people in ABB thinks you have to come from the industry and having 30 years of experience. So it's the same. But I think it's also how you package your previous experience and because some of the things you have done would be as applicable for our company as even if you've been from a very different background. But the leaders who recruit, if you describe it in a certain way, you would just end up like, no, not interesting. So I think it's more how you package also your experience, the skills, and really think through, because it's probably, maybe we need a bit of support there. I'm saying we, because I probably would fall into that bucket myself. But how could you promote your skills differently so that your experience actually become relevant and agnostic from industry? So maybe that could be one.
I think you're spot on. I'm jumping back in again, but what we see at LinkedIn is exactly that. Like, it's less and less a matter of like the job title. What's really changing is the portfolio of skills that an employer is looking for when they're trying to fill a role. And so being able to tell your story, sell yourself, however we think about it, have your narrative, is really around like, I've done this job, I have all these skills. Maybe I didn't have that title, but I do this, and I guarantee you I can land this. And so I want to just emphasize again your skill point. We absolutely see the importance of these skills now, much more than maybe even, again, 5-10 years ago.
Hello. Does it work? Okay. Thank you so much for this amazing panel. My question is very direct. I hope you understand that it comes from a very good place. I think, like, when you were talking about the structural changes, one thing that women, and also as the more intersectional you are, the more you suffer from it, is like sexual harassment or racism or any kind of macro or microaggressions. And I do think that it really impacts the person and the professional. And so I do think that that's a big contribution to how you can thrive, right? So my question is, what advice do you have for someone who yeah, like, went through this and they're maybe feeling alone, or maybe it wasn't even directed to them, but they witnessed something and they don't know what to do. Yeah, just curious about, but just, your personal perspective.
Okay, I'm going to answer just as an African American woman, a black woman born in Texas, right, for what it's worth. And I definitely have seen craziness, right? I'll just put it out like that. Though not at LinkedIn, for everyone who's recording this. I have seen craziness in the past, and the honest answer is sometimes I was able to be like, that's a you problem and not a me problem. That's an awesome answer. It's not always easy to do that. Sometimes it totally got in my head and lived rent-free in my head, and I was like turning and spiraling, right? So the truth is, you don't always control how you react to a situation, even though the advice is, you control your own reactions. My advice is sometimes you can't always win, like as an individual, right? I have made choices to stay and to go based on where my head was. But I tried to make the most intentional choice for myself. I know that's not a very satisfactory answer, but like the world is full of craziness in different ways for all of us, whether we're men or women or what race we are or what religion. But I think sometimes you decide, I'm here for my purpose. And there's a great quote by an American author who was like, the purpose, and this is about racism, but she said the purpose of racism is to distract you. So I spent a lot of my time thinking, I'm not going to get distracted by this idiot. I'm going to my goal is over here and you can. So I've had that. Occasionally I've been very successful with that mantra. It helps, but I don't have a better answer. Sorry. Don't be distracted.
No, my answer would be, of course, as an individual, you should ensure you have proper support if something happened, be it if it was in a company or, that's of course. But I have been a bit mentally trying to equip myself very similar because, of course, also being 30 years in companies that are operating around the world, different cultures, different acceptance, respect. You will for sure get comments or feedback along your. So it's also to just and that sounds, of course, a bit sad, but to be prepared. In many situations, you will be able to kick in with what you have planned to respond. And I typically go with curiosity because that's a good weapon. You can just say, well, tell me more, because people are really, if someone comments and you start to ask why, they realize they're really not in a good place. So that's a good thing to have us, be curious. Don't judge. It's a you problem, not as you say. It's a very good one, but of course sometimes it hits you because you're maybe stressed. You're not. And of course we should not need to be prepared. But but I think you will always find and ensure you find good colleagues that will be there to support. And what I found really interesting now, given the last couple of I would say 3 to 5 years tension around also the whole topic that we're discussing right now, we have found a strength as a company that we don't want to be political, but we want to be firm on what culture we want to have in the company, and then you can really work with your values, as I said, come as you are. And the response we get from employees in some countries, they say the company is my safe space. That's where I can be who I am. Then we can make a difference as a company and also avoid a lot of the things that happens maybe outside the company. Yeah.
I can give a one-line personal answer: ask for help and then pay it forward.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and also never ever underestimate the impact of allies. Mm-hmm. Because in a situation of microaggression, when someone, for example, interrupts you, your ally is going to say, wait a second, I want to hear what Anne is going to say. Or, for example, someone appropriates your idea. It's going to say, how fantastic that you come back to the idea that Anne had just 5 minutes ago. So we should do definitely more of that. I get here, we have to finish. You have to finish. Thank you so much. I'm sure
Thank you.
to join me. Thank you. Fantastic panel. For the wisdom, the insights, but I think also for the optimism. And there's one thing that I'm sure we all take from the discussion today. It's clear that we can rebuild whatever is not working, and we must. And in the white paper we say, you do not fix a broken ladder by coaching how to climb it. You fix it by basically rebuilding the ladder. And that's exactly what we'll be doing with your help, and you're going to be part of what's going to come next. Thank you very much.